Alright guys, we're going to take a look at graphing sine and cosine, and so far we've done amplitude. That's a vertical stretch where we take the graph and we stretch it vertically. Today we're going to look at a vertical shift, which is different. That's where we take the graph and we don't stretch it at all, we just move it up or down. So we're going to graph sine and cosine with a vertical shift here today. So let's take a look at this equation. They say they want a graph of y equals sine theta plus 3. So this is really similar to just graphing sine. The only difference is this plus 3, right? So what this plus 3 is going to do, and this is actually really simple, is it's just going to move my entire graph up 3. So some people actually call this the midline, because the midline tells me where on the graph is kind of like the center point of my sine or cosine graph. So in this case, what I would do is right here at 3, I'm just going to throw a dotted line the whole way down, just like that. Okay, and let's throw some labels on here. This is 3, this is -2. Now, when I graph this, I'm going to graph this just like I would graph sine. So let's go ahead and do this, this x-axis here, the theta. At 4 points, we should be the whole way through our unit circle, right? That's going to be 2 pi. This is going to be the top of my unit circle, so pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. And you could carry this out further if you wanted to. I'll just stop right there. This is just like before. We're not going to do anything different with the theta axis down here. We're going to keep this exactly the same. What I am going to do is I'm going to slide my entire graph up. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend like this is my original axis. So I'm going to graph sine just like this. So in this case, let's look over here in the top right. What I end up with is these are the key points on my unit circle, right? And remember, when I'm doing this, this is cosine is my x value, cosine, and sine is my y value. So as I look at this, my first spot on my unit circle is 0, so I'm going to graph that at 3. So normally I graph it at 0, right? But in this case, because of the plus 3, my midline moves my entire graph up to 3. My next sine value is going to be at 1, so I'm going to go up 1. So at pi over 2, I'm going to graph up 1. Here, again, I'm back to 0 again. So I'll graph that right there. And then down to -1 because of this point right here. And then I'm back to 0 again. And I could do two periods of this. I could graph it out, 1, 0, -1, 0 back, or 1, 0, excuse me, 0, 1, 0, -1, 0, and do a whole nother loop here. I'm not going to, I'm just going to do 1, but you could if you wanted to. And then let's go ahead and sketch this out, and this is going to be a little rough, but something along those lines. You're going to want some sort of S-type curve when we're doing this. Okay, and there you go. There's the graph. It's the exact same as sine of theta. It's just slid up 3, not stretched, just slid. All right, so let's look at one more. This time we're going to do a cosine graph. Notice where our midline is. Our midline here is at -1. And then also notice in this case, we're going to have an amplitude of 2. The last one was just a regular amplitude of 1. This one I've got an amplitude of 2. So let's go ahead, before we start, let's label our axes. This is 2, this is -2, this is my y, this is my theta. And then let's go ahead and label these guys. And every time right now, we're just going to set these up, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi. We're just going to take our unit circle and rotate around. All right, so my midline is at -1, so I'm going to go ahead and put that on my graph before I start graphing anything. So let's carry that out the whole way. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and graph my cosines. Now remember, my cosines are here, they're my x values. I'm going 1, 0, -1, 0, 1. Now, I do have to keep in mind that I've got this 2 I need to deal with. So I'm going to, again, this is a vertical stretch. This is a vertical shift. I've shifted it down 1, but now I need to stretch it to be double. Instead of going up 1, I'm going to go up 2. Instead of going down 2 or down 1, I'm going to go down 2. So it's going to look something like this. My original point would be up 1 from my midline. Normally I'd be here, but I actually need to go up 2 from my midline. So I'm going up 1, 2. That is my original, that's going to be my new original point. Okay. The next one, pi over 2, that's normally going to be 0. That's going to just stay 0, right? And that's going to stay 0 relative to my midline. And then the next one is -1. So instead of going down 1, I'm going to go down 2 spots. Notice I'm not graphing it at -2. I'm graphing it down 2 from my midline. That's how those two work together. And then we're going to work our way back up from 0. And then 1 times 2, that's going to be 2. And it's going to look something like this. And again, I'll do the best I can here. And it's going to look something like that. And again, if I wanted to, I could add some more points on here because it just cycles back through again, right? I could add these points and I could add a second period. Again, try to give it a little bit of a curve so it's not like a V the whole way through. I could do a little bit of a better job. But this is roughly what it's going to look like. The main points is this is your midline. Over here on the right side, when I have something like A sine theta, we'll say plus D. This is my displacement. It's my shift vertically. The A is my vertical stretch. So this is vertical shift. This is vertical stretch. All right. So there's 2 examples of how to graph them. You can also find other examples online if you want to search some videos. A lot of times those are going to have some changes in the x-axis as well, or the theta axis, whichever one they call it. Hopefully this makes sense. There's some practice that you can do where it will grade you if you're doing it right or wrong, so you can kind of check yourself as you're going. It's a really good Desmos activity on this that would be worth taking a look at. So this wraps up the lesson on vertical shift with graphing sine and cosine. Go ahead, try some of the practice and see if you can figure it out.